Elected member for Georgetown South.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially, we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. Proceed.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker, messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Cayman Islands Government, an unaudited quarterly financial report. 9-month period ending the 30th of September 2018. Core Government, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Government, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the unaudited quarterly financial report of the core government of the Cayman Islands for the 9-month period ended September 30th, 2018.
So ordered. Is the member speaking there too? Minister of Finance.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the 9th of November 2018, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development arranged for the gazettal of the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the period, and honourable members of the Legislative Assembly was sent a copy of this report by email. Mr. Speaker, the information referred to in this report is based on records obtained from the General Ledger of the Government's Financial Management System on the 8th of October 2018. It is also based on the representations and judgments provided by the Chief Financial Officers of our ministries, portfolios, offices, and statutory authorities and government companies. Effective 1st of January 2018, Government transitioned to a 12-month financial year, which coincides with the calendar year ending on December 31st. Mr. Speaker, all of the amounts that I will provide from this point onwards are in Cayman Islands dollars. The statement of financial position as at the 30th of September 2018 on page 17 of the table, 7 of the document, shows that the core government ended the period with $2.3 billion in total assets, $1 billion in total liabilities, and therefore $1.3 billion in net assets or net worth. Cash and cash equivalents, including fixed deposits with maturity durations not exceeding 90 days, were $46.1 million, and marketable securities, which comprised of fixed deposits with maturity durations exceeding 90 days, were $489.1 million, for a total of $535.2 million with respect to bank account balances. Mr. Speaker, due to the significant cash balances on hand, government now places funds on longer-term fixed deposits, thereby attracting higher interest rates. These longer-term deposits are reflected as marketable securities on the Statement of Financial Position and are not included in the definition of cash and cash equivalents, which only represents deposits that are 90 days or less to maturity. So to re-emphasize, at the end of September 2018, we had total cash balances of $535.2 million. Mr. Speaker, at that date, the public debt for the core government stood at $430.2 million. This was some $35.7 million lower than the debt balance at the 30th of September 2017. Therefore, core government's debt has been reduced by $35.7 million over the one-year period, and it will continue to decline, coinciding with the regularly scheduled principal repayments that will continue to occur. The Statement of Financial Performance for the period, shown on page 10 of the document, shows that core government earned total operating revenues of $639.3 million and incurred total operating expenditures of $466.5 million. The resulting operating surplus for the core government was $172.8 million, with SAGCs contributing an additional $11 million to the operating surplus as a result of their favorable performance. The entire public sector has produced an operating surplus of $183.8 million for the year to date. Mr. Speaker, revenue recorded for the first 9 months of 2018 was $54.4 million above budget expectations. This positive variance was mainly concentrated in the category of our coercive revenues, which are revenues received by government for which it does not provide any goods or services. This type of revenue includes levies on property, an example of which stamp duty on land transfers is one, was $16.4 million above budget expectations. Import duties, for example, the general categories of other duty was $7.8 million, and duty on gasoline and diesel was $2.3 million better than budget. Other levies on international trade and transactions, which includes cruise ship departure charges, were $0.9 million greater than budget expectations for the period. And domestic levies on goods and services include the following examples of revenue items with the following positive variances through the third quarter of 2018. Banks and trust licenses, or $4.3 million greater than budget. Mutual fund administration licenses were $3.9 million better than budget. Tourist accommodation charges were $5 million in excess of the period's expectations. And traders' licenses were $1.3 million greater than expected revenues for the period. These positive variances from the budget expectations are partially offset by negative variances in other revenue items such as the provision for continuation of work permit grant, $4.5 million, annual permanent residency work permit fees, $2 million, and work permit fees, $3.5 million. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the higher revenues recorded, expenses incurred for the period were lower than budget by some $21.6 million. And the areas that achieved the largest under expenditures were the categories of personnel costs and supplies and consumables. Costs relating to personnel through the third quarter of 2018 amounted to $212.7 million, which reflects an underspending in personnel costs of $13.2 million compared to a budget of $225.9 million. And this favorable variance, Mr. Speaker, is a result of several ministries and portfolios still having vacant posts which to date remain unfilled, including positions for the Fire Service and Workforce Opportunity and Residency Command Work Department. It is also important to note that the government awarded a 5% cost of living adjustment with an effective date of July 1, 2018, but which was paid in September 2018. Supplies and consumables were also lower than projected, producing an underspend of $15.1 million. Within the supplies and consumables classification, the most significant under expenditure related to the category of purchases of services, which accounts for 67% of the $15.1 million overall positive variance in the supplies and consumables classification. Ministries and portfolios continue to indicate to us that spending is anticipated to increase as the year progresses and costs will realign closer to budgeted projections by the end of the 2018 year. However, there will most likely be some degree of underspend existing at the end of the year. Turning now to the statements of cash flows, Mr. Speaker, on page 15 of the document. This statement shows that the net cash inflows from operating activities totaled $153.4 million. Net outflows used by investing and financing activities totaled $147.8 million and $20.6 million, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the overall fiscal performance reported for the period shows an operating surplus of $183.8 million, which is $91.3 million higher than the budget expectations for the period. This favorable result was due to revenues and expenses performing better than the third quarter's budget projections, coupled with favorable contributions by SAGCs. Government, once again, ended its cash position with $535.2 million, which is $112 million higher than anticipated in the 2018 planning estimate. Now, Mr. Speaker, a significant portion of this cash will be used for the repayment towards the bond repayment that will occur in November 2019. And I remind this Honourable House that that bond that matures in 2019 is for $261 million. Mr. Speaker, as expected, revenues in the third quarter of 2018 were lower than previous quarters in the current 2018 financial year. This is due to a significant portion of government revenues in the first two quarters being derived from the renewal of financial services-related licenses, which are due at the beginning of the year. In addition, the third quarter produced similar expenses as the previous quarters. Expenses were higher than revenues for core government in the third quarter by $17.9 million. SAGCs contributed $0.7 million for the third quarter, which partially offset the loss of core government and resulted in an overall net deficit of $17.2 million for the 3 months period ending September 30th, 2018. When the third quarter results are combined with the significant surpluses from the first two quarters, there is an overall net surplus for the entire public sector of $183.8 million. Mr. Speaker, the performance of the first 3 quarters of the year has positioned the government to be quite optimistic about achieving or reaching its budgeted performance. If ministries, portfolios, and SAGCs remain diligent, the government should, at a very minimum, achieve the budgeted entire public sector net surplus of $81 million at the end of 2018. However, the performance of the final quarter of 2018 will determine whether the government meets its budgeted performance or surpasses it by a significant margin. It is anticipated that that expenditures will, at a minimum, stay at the level seen in the second and third quarters. Positive results in revenue are expected to sufficiently mitigate any additional costs. However, proper diligence must be maintained by all chief officers in the civil service and CEOs and MDs in the wider public service. Mr. Speaker, the unaudited financial report for the core government for the 9-month period is available on the government's and the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development's website, www.gov.ky and www.mof.gov.ky. And Mr. Speaker, these figures for the 3 quarters through the end of September validate all of the data that I have been speaking about through this financial year with regard coming out of the Economics and Statistics Office that clearly show that the economy of the Cayman Islands continue to be on the right track, with growth continuing in many cases to accelerate. And as a result, we are seeing the very favorable results with regard to government's financial position and results, decreases in employment rates, and continued expansion in the overall economy. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The 15th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life, 1st of February 2018 to the 31st of July 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honourable, the Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 15th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life, which covers the period 1st of February 2018 to the 31st of July 2018.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Deputy Governor speaking there too?
Just briefly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Commission of Standards in Public Life continues to operate under the very able leadership of Ms. Rosa Whitaker-Miles. And during the reporting period, she served alongside members Mrs. Sheena Hislop and Pastor Cheyenne O'Connor. This report covers the progress made and the key issues arising from the work completed by the Commission during the first half of their 4th year in office. During the reporting period, the members tabled the Commission's 14th report, which is now available on the Commission website, continue to follow up with the government on a commencement date and regulations for the Standard in Public Life legislation, reviewed and discussed the Procurement Law 2016, the Procurement Regulations 2018, and the Draft Procurement Code of Conduct, inspected the current Register of Interests, ROI, and met with the members of Legislative Assembly ROI Committee to discuss their observations and questions arising from the ROI inspection, and followed up with the ROI Committee. Continue to follow up with the Cabinet Office on the status of the draft Ministerial Code of Conduct and the expected date of its finalization. Liaise with the Honourable Deputy Governor and the Leader of the Opposition and Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and requested further information regarding a news article entitled "PAC Motion Threatens CEO with Contempt" in order to consider the matter. Reviewed the Internal Audit Service, the IAS, report on the Commission concerns arising from the Gender Equality Tribunal ruling on the matter Arfle et al. Versus Her Majesty's Prison Service in order to provide feedback to the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration, and discuss the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime Anti-Corruption educational program titled Education for Justice, and agreed to commence outreach to various educational stakeholders in the Cayman Islands to explore the level of interest in implementing the program. Over the next reporting period, the Commission intends to continue to liaise with the Office of the Premier to secure a commencement date for the law and amended law, as well as accompanying regulations. In addition, the Commission will also continue to follow up with the Clerk on the ROI Committee, response to his queries, concerns arising from the ROI inspection regarding the declarations, continue to follow up with the Cabinet Secretary on the status of the draft Ministerial Code of Conduct and identify a time frame for finalization, liaise with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee to arrange a meeting with the Chairman to discuss the matter previously mentioned. Respond to the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration to provide its feedback on the IAS report on the matter Arfle et al. Versus Her Majesty's Prison Service. Begin outreach to various educational stakeholders to explore the level of interest in implementing the UNODC E4J program. Work towards hosting the 5th annual conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, and continue to participate in inter-public relation opportunities as well as in local and regional cooperation efforts where possible. Mr. Speaker, I encourage members of the House and the public to familiarize themselves with the contents of the report, which is available online at www.standardsinpubliclifecommission.ky. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet. The elected member of Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, question number 26.
The elected member for Georgetown Central, question number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question standing my name on the order paper number 26 that reads as such. Can the Honourable Minister say how many employees of the Department of Environmental Health are on temporary contracts and why?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as of the 19th of November, which is on Monday, there will be 11 temporary contracted employees at the Department of Environmental Health. The DEH has been plagued with various issues disrupting service. The most notable area of the department has been affected is the solid waste section collections unit, which continues to experience periodic delays with the residential and commercial pickups. Service has been hampered, particularly due to the employee absenteeism and gaps in unfilled posts, necessitating overtime expenses. These temporary contracted employees were put into place to fill the gaps while we work to regularize the structure and processes within the department. Thank you.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementaries.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. It is of my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that there was a number of persons on contract but no longer on contract. Those temporary contracts came to its end. And I understand that the reason for those contracts were to fill the gaps, like the minister just said. Is the minister now saying that the problems that they were having with the dump are now completed, why they no longer need those temporary contractors.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, some of these posts, as we heard, was a temporary position, were not budgeted for. However, a need was identified after the fact, and therefore a temporary hire could only be realized through the savings from prorated or unfilled vacancies where the recruitment process has not yet been finalized. The delay in filling other posts was particularly as a result of the absence of key senior staff members. The load of specific functions and other responsibilities were shared by a few remaining members of the management team, in particular inclusive of the HR manager. There was also increased pressure in following areas: monitoring of overtime, providing personnel stats in an entire department to the chief officer on a weekly basis, responding to audit queries, in addition to overseeing daily activities. This caused a significant delay in recruitment. Had become a priority in the midst of public scrutiny and increased customer complaints across the department. Mr. Speaker, I think what the member from Georgetown Central is asking is, and I thank him for the question in terms of these temporary employees at the collections at DEH. As I understand it, some of these temporary employees were performing at a very high level, and we must recognize that they were hired under the guise of being temporary employees, and they full knew what they signed up for. However, as I understand it from management, they were doing such a great job that no one, including our government, would ever want to see them go away if they're the ones who are performing at the highest level in that collections department. I want to put on record that I thank the ministry and the seconded director and manager of collections and the deputy governor for all the work that they have done in trying to shore up that department. And I think within a few weeks, we will definitely see a difference in this department. But we're trying to do all that we can to ensure that if persons are there who are not performing, and we have temporary workers who can fill their posts, that would be a transition that could happen after applying for the post. So I thank the member for the question. I hope that this answers.
Member for Georgetown Central, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say how many long-term employees have been hired since the ISWIM's discussions have been started?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that information available, but I undertake to get it to the member. I don't have that information available here.
Mr. Speaker.
Member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see that the minister has his chief officer here, and there is some indication of gesturing to him. Maybe the minister can have a short discussion with the minister, because this is a very important topic for me today. So if he can speak with her, maybe you can get the information now, as I have some other follow-up supplementary questions.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can say is that the current staff complement of DEH is 123 in total. The question that the member from Georgetown Central asked is a very technical question, because the ISWIM's discussion started probably over 2 years ago. And that information would have to be researched. Mr. Speaker, the ministry would need time to go through that, to be able to provide that information.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the minister as well. I do agree that you would need time to find that out, considering it's been 2 years. Can the minister say whether or not there's been any attempt to no longer hire permanent persons for post as a result that it may affect the ISWIM's contract negotiations?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. What I will say is that the preferred bidder has already agreed that whatever jobs is captured in their responsibility, they're willing to take on those staff, and that's only about 20 staff that is in the preferred bidders contract area. What I must say is that, and what the member from Georgetown Central would be glad to know, happy to know, is that there will be 65 additional jobs if the ISWIM's contract is realized. So there will be some 45 more jobs than there are employees there. And there has been hiring that has went on since the ISWIM's negotiation started. So there has been no slowdown in hiring. Whatever post needed to be filled, and what the member from Georgetown Central needs to be reminded, and I think we shouldn't confuse the two, is that collections is not a part of ISWIM's. That was specifically carved out by the government in terms of having collections still run by our DEH department.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say if he has any updates on new measures to resolve this ongoing garbage collection problem that's been going on now over 18 months?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can advise the member from Georgetown Central, and I thank him for the question, that the new acting director who has been seconded to this department is doing a great job in trying to resolve this situation. And he's only been on the job some 4 months, and we're talking about a 20-year-old problem, and we are getting the grasp of what is necessary. And I can assure him that with the temporary workers coming back on Monday, and with a new initiative that has been agreed with and this would probably be a new announcement, between Minister of Financial Services, Minister Rivers, sorry, don't remember the West Bay South, member from South Side, West Bay, initiative with the prisoners who are being trained right now. A number of them are being trained, and I can just only applaud the director, the acting director, for with his eloquent background in thinking of this this method to be able to fill the stop gaps. In case of absenteeism, we have a backup plan. So as we're trying to resolve the human resources problems that we have, and we're trying to do that correctly, and we are also working on backup plans, and one of those backup plans is the prisoners are going to be assisting with collections, which is a true testament of this government trying to ensure that they are rehabilitated and ready for work when they come back out, when they're released. So that will start within the next week, and also the temporary workers will be back on. So I know, as every member in this house, has had some concerns in terms of garbage not being collected in their areas. And we've all had our frustrations. And we work on this every day trying to, and I think we've found a resolve now that will make not only the members of this house satisfied, but the country in itself, and bring back the pride in terms of how clean this country was always noted for by tourists and visiting persons alike to this country. And we must take great pride not only in that, but the citizens of this country also needs to take great pride as we see the grass hogs as they clean the sides of the roads. So many people throw their garbage out of the window, and we need to find a ticketable system and ticket people. Yes. And it must be noted that the prisoners that will be involved in this are all low risk prisoners, and they'll be properly assessed and trained. And before this program is rolled out. So this is. We have to give them some opportunity, and so we have to try, and if it doesn't work, then we'll change our strategy. But this is our strategy right now to ensure that the persons that are there who are not working out be changed and replaced, and also having a backup plan with some temporary workers.
Member for Georgetown Central is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, supplementary question, and I'm going to I just have two more, and I'll allow the other members to ask their questions. But since you brought the prisoners, can you say how much they're going to be paid, or if they're going to be paid? and then one after that.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, they won't be paid. They'll be usually getting their usual stipend from the prison, not from the department.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Georgetown Central.
If I can just share a preliminary, I really feel bad for the minister because ideally he's not in charge of hiring and firing, and I know if he was, he would have this problem already solved. And I therefore employ those in the ministry to get the job fixed. It's reflecting on each and every one of us in here, and neither does the minister deserve this kind of backlash at all.
Question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say whether or not there's been any considerations of security of employment within the negotiations of the ISRIMs with the private contractors? And let me just see if I can elaborate exactly what the question is. For those Caymanians who are currently working at that section of the landfill that will eventually move over to the privated company who's having this deal with government, will there be a security of tenure for them for a period of time or what have you?
The question, I think, drifts way beyond the original, and I would think you would need a substantive question on that, honorable member. If there are no more supplementaries, I think we have the member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can tell us exactly what these prisoners, what part the prisoners will play in the collection of garbage.
Honorable Minister.
I want to thank the member from East End for that question. What he answered it, collecting garbage, and they won't be driving the trucks.
Member for East End.
Mr. Speaker, can he explain to us what role will they be playing in the collection of garbage?
Honorable Minister.
What I will do for the members is actually give the title assistant collectors, which they assist with the collection. Yeah.
Obviously.
Mr. Speaker, that's fine. There's no laughing matter about that. Does that mean then that they will be riding on the trucks in the collection of the garbage
Honorable
as
Minister?
assistants?
As I understand it, Mr. Speaker, yes. To collect and assist, they will have to ride.
The member for East End.
Thank you. There's method to my madness. All right. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can tell us if those prisoners will be supervised by personnel from the prison.
Yeah. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As this negotiations is ongoing. What I can say to the member from East End is that a supervisor will be with the prisoners on a daily basis. And they will also not only be assisting on the rear of the garbage trucks, but also on the sides of the roads. System collectors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hate to prolong this, but I wonder if those supervisors will be civilians or prison personnel.
Honorable Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, prison guard supervisors.
Member for Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because I would hasten to remind us of what happened 12 years ago. 12 years ago, Mr. Speaker, with a civilian supervisor of low-risk prisoners. That should be alive and well and fresh in our memory, in our subconscious. And this is even further exposure of our people to prisoners into our community. The previous one was deep within the lands. No, he don't want to be speaker. Sound like deputy governor want to run up inside there too. Mr. Speaker.
Member from East End.
I have another question which is a little different, but I needed to remind us of that. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if the minister can tell us what is taking so long to regularize this personnel matter. Absenteeism, I hear the minister say. I wonder if we remember Ronald Reagan in the 80s. What is taking so long to get these people to regularize when we have temporary people there? Put them permanent. And let's get rid of those that are permanent and don't want to work. What is taking that so long?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to do this, but I think we're in the same boat with the same question. I am, as a member from Georgetown Central say, I don't hire and fire, and I have to respect the process, albeit the process do seem a little long, but I'm sure that they're carrying out the rules and regulations of the civil service, and I think it is embarrassing for a country that we have such a national problem as this, and it can't be remedied or it couldn't be remedied as quickly as possible. But I can assure you that the Deputy Governor has given me an undertaking that I will never have to bring this up again in Cabinet, as it was just brought up recently. And there were some immediate resolves taking place. As we speak now, there's stuff going on, which are internal stuff that we can talk about off the mic. But I can assure you that come December, we won't have the same problem that we had last December. And I've stressed on that so much that it's they're becoming tired of hearing it. And it's not about protecting them. I must remind the member for Georgetown Central that they are Caymanians, So we have to treat them with respect also. But at the same time, we as a country has suffered quite long. And it's not only under me as a minister. This has been happening for many years. The thing about it is I drilled down and actually went on site and at the collections and to try to find out exactly what the problem is. I'm interested in solving it because it shouldn't be happening at this point. And I undertake, along with the deputy governor, that at the end of my term, we won't have the same problem that we're having now. And these things do take time, as we've learned now in government. It's one of my frustrations, I must admit. I'm not used to this coming from the private sector. But I have to be respectful of the process. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
This is the last supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for his
Member for East End.
For his trying to appease this situation, but I would hasten to encourage him to work hard to get the political directorate to direct that this thing get corrected now. Or those who don't correct it, then deal with them too. But Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to ask the Minister one other question, and that is the DEH collecting or trying to collect all of the residential and commercial garbage at this stage?
The answer, Mr. Speaker, is yes.
We're long past the hour of 11 o'clock, and I remiss of myself to have called for the suspension.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 23, 7, and 8 in order that questions may be asked of ministers after the hour of 11 o'clock, and pray forgiveness for the time that's already gone by.
Question is that standing orders be suspended, questions to be asked after 11 a.m. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, question number 27.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper as number 27. Can the Honourable Minister say how many bus stops we have in Grand Cayman?
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, there are 109 bus stops in Grand Cayman.
Supplementary. The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to give a very, very short preamble and then ask my question. At the NRA recent Road Safety Conference, the Vice President of the International Road Federation and safety expert, Mr. Michael Dresnes, suggested that our current ad hoc drop-off and pick-up transport system is the most unsafe in the world and suggests that we should allocate the necessary bus stops across the country. Can the minister say, I'm about to give it now. Can the minister say if the government has any plans on installing any more bus stops?
Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bus stops are handled through public transport. What I can say to the member is that there was a retreat that the Public Transport Board looked at the overall transportation situation in the Cayman Islands. I'm assuming that bus stops were on the agenda and reviewed.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Can the minister say if there's any recommendations or plan changes to our road and transport system that may have come as a result of that conference that the government plans to implement?
Honorable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I have not been updated on the results of the retreat.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't ask him if he was updated. I asked him if the government has any plans. I don't know if he's answering a different question, but I can repeat it again, Mr. Speaker.
I thought you said coming out of the conference or the retreat.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Mr. Speaker,
he has answered, he has said that he has not been updated.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm finished.
Question number 28.
The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, question number 28.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper labeled as number 28. Can the Honourable Minister give an update on what measures are being taken by the government to help reduce the high cost of health care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question in itself, Mr. Speaker, I would say is kind of vague, because oh my God, vaguely broad, but because I was wondering whether his quest was about the high cost in insurance premiums or the high cost of the actual service in itself. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, and what I will attempt to do is to try to give the member both answers, and with the hope that there will be no supplementaries. Mr. Speaker, since taking office in 2017, I've had several discussions with my ministry staff and various agencies regarding high health care costs and the need to identify ways to address this in our community. Mr. Speaker, you may want to know that we have had presentations from many organizations internationally and locally with caucus, and there's great potential in trying to reduce the cost of health care in all areas in this wonderful country. I've heard concerns of people who struggle to meet the cost of their medications from their chronic, non-communicable diseases and the financial challenges individuals and families face in the event of a catastrophic illness. There have been many discussions about the role government can and should play in helping to mitigate some of these issues, Mr. Speaker, I have also had a number of discussions regarding the government's increasing expenditure on health care for people and how it might be addressed in a more sustainable way. You will appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that the high cost of health care, such as the cost of doctors' visits, prescriptions, and health insurance premiums, are also a contributing factor to the government's expenditure on health care. In fact, I believe they are closely intertwined and sometimes referred to interchangeably. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, I will mention some of the measures government is taking to reduce health care costs, as well as some of the measures to reduce health care expenditure. And I'm sure members are keen to hear about our efforts on both of the fronts. Mr. Speaker, the efforts including the following. Improve health education and promotion, such as the smoking cessation program introduced by the Public Health Department. This program has shown a remarkable success since its inception in 2014, with 56 persons successfully quitting. Mr. Speaker, this will translate into lower long-term health care costs for these persons who are now smoke-free. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that in 2013, the health insurance legislation was amended, and the plan of benefits for the standard health insurance contract, or the SHIC plan, was significantly enhanced to better facilitate insured individuals' access to preventative care, with an increased annual outpatient benefit of $400 to cover doctors' visits, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, and physiotherapy, with physician referral, and a new $200 annual wellness services benefit to cover routine physicals, annual exams, child care, nutritional counseling with physician referral, and dental checkups. The SHIC benefits are embedded in every health insurance plan sold by approved insurers. This means that every one of us has these benefits at a minimum in our insurance plans. Mr. Speaker, I'm a strong believer in the benefits of preventative care and wellness, and the long-term savings that can be gained by maintaining optimal health through prevention. I hope that everyone is taking advantage of these wellness benefits available to us and increasing our chances of having good health and maintaining a good quality of life. Mr. Speaker, you recognize the need for empowering, educating, and providing information for our residents through initiatives such as annual health care conference, which this year attracted over 1,200 attendees. This is an indication that this conference continues to grow and has over the years provided important takeaway messages for everyone to develop and or improve their lifestyles. Mr. Speaker, I believe that with a better informed society, people will make better choices and live longer and healthier lives. I believe that educating and empowering the public to make these healthier lifestyles choices will help to reduce the burden of chronic non-communicable diseases, which will help to reduce healthcare spending in the future. The Health Services Authority K-Health program, introduced in 2010, aligns patients with a dedicated primary care physician, currently serving the clients of the needs assessment units, the indigents. This program remains successful by reducing the number of visits to the accident emergency room and increasing visits to the general practice clinic, thereby reducing unnecessary visits to the specialists. It has also demonstrated better health outcomes for the patients with diabetes and hypertension, which again should help reduce long-term health care needs and associated costs. Mr. Speaker, I must admit that my unity government, which I have a profound pleasure in working with, and in regards to free health care for children, Mr. Speaker, and affordable health care for retirees and seniors is something that we're avidly looking at, Mr. Speaker. We have to find a way to make this happen, and I believe it's truly, as the member from Bordentown West so eloquently stated, about bipartisan support. I think that this is one of the efforts that we, along with the opposition, can work towards in trying to achieve this outcome for this great nation in terms of free health care. The amount of relief that this free health care for children, the amount of relief that this will have for families, for parents, and the reduction of cost alone will be a magnificent amount. And this is something that I've met with the Health Insurance Commission about on many occasions, and they're avidly working at this time, trying to come up with some answers for our caucus to be able to decide on what direction we take in terms of providing this relief for Caymanian families. This will be a big win for this country, Mr. Speaker. In 2017, the Health Services Authority introduced a reverse auction process to procure pharmaceuticals and medical supplies with projected annual savings of some 32%, Mr. Speaker. While the exact percentage of savings to date is not yet available, I believe everyone stands to benefit from reduced medication costs. The Healthcare Authority has also revised its pricing model for pharmaceuticals in line with the private sector to be more competitive, and at the same time reducing the costs of many of its prescription medications, as they were higher than some of those in the private pharmacies. This will result in reduced healthcare costs for the patients using the HSA pharmacy, as well as reduced government expenditure on healthcare for the populations that we currently pay for. Mr. Speaker, the Health Services Authority has also established evidence-based protocols for the delivery of care in accordance with international best practice. This will result in decreased spending, as physicians will be guided by these protocols, thereby eliminating the need for inappropriate interventions. Mr. Speaker, there is a continuing partnership between the Health Services Authority and some non-governmental organizations, including Cancer Society, Lions Club of Tropical Gardens, to name a couple, to assist members of the public in accessing mammograms at reduced cost or free. In many cases, in addition to making mammograms free for many women, removing costs as barriers to access. These partnerships have allowed more women to access this important preventative screening tool, which has resulted in many breast cancer cases being detected earlier with better outcomes. Mr. Speaker, the ministry has also embarked on a study to access feasibility of health insurance plan tailored to the needs of retirees and senior citizens, called the SHIC 65. The study is guided by the following principles: access to care, affordability, and sustainability. Once the final report is received by the ministry, I will be able to update members on its finding and the proposed actions arising from the study. Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to see new cases of HIV and AIDS in the Cayman Islands. These patients are provided with free care of treatment for this condition at the Public Health Department, and this output currently costs government some $942,000 per year. The ministry is also currently in discussions with PAHO to finalize a Pan-American Health Organization strategy fund agreement, commencing with the purchasing of antivirals used in the treatment of HIV and AIDS. Mr. Speaker, once they have been finalized, we'll be able to access these critical treatments at a significantly reduced cost. Mr. Speaker, as members will be aware, the ministry pays for the non-HSA health care received by indigents, seafarers, and veterans, and advanced patients. Cineco, the agency responsible for contracting with the networks for both overseas and local care outside of the HSA, regularly access their U.S. networks of providers through a tender process to ensure that they have engaged the best network with the highest discounts available. The last such tender process saw Cineco moving from an average of 35% discount to an average of 50% discount, enabling them to achieve significant savings. Mr. Speaker, the next tender process is scheduled for 2019, and it is hoped that further savings will be realized as a result. Mr. Speaker, I must note that when we talk about indigent seafarers and veterans, they make up 20% of the responsibility of health care on the government, and is actually 80% of the cost. Mr. Speaker, we have, and as a government, we have been discussing many initiatives that we could undertake to try to reduce this cost on this country. Mr. Speaker, in addition, Cineco has a medical case management unit in-house which ensures that the appropriate care is provided in the most cost-effective manner based on industry standards and best practices. They conduct prospective, concurrent, and retrospective views of care for services provided outside of the HSA, providing important oversight and evaluation of care being accessed. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Health City Cayman Islands opened in 2014 primarily to offer cardiovascular care. Since then, it has expanded its offerings, allowing more persons to receive different types of tertiary care on the island. Cineco has recently undertaken to conduct a further analysis of Health City Cayman Islands costs during the expanded services to update the initial study done in 2014 and see how Health City's costs compare to those costs Cineco can access through their overseas network. This work is still in progress, but once completed, it will give Cineco important information to help ensure that their clients are getting the best quality health care and the most cost-effective prices. Mr. Speaker, it is not really any surprise that based on the information received from Cineco, that the non-communicable diseases consume the majority of claimed dollars. Between January 2018 and September 2018, approximately $26 million has been paid to overseas facilities, $6.6 million of which has been for the non-communicable diseases such as cancer, heart failure, and other unspecified illness. In the same period, Mr. Speaker, approximately $8.2 million has been spent at Health City Cayman Islands 2.1 million of which was for diseases such as hypertension, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease. With regards to our local providers, excluding Health City, the amount spent by Cineco in the same period is 65 million, of which 14 million was for repeat prescriptions, 8 million assistance at home, 1.7 million and chronic kidney disease, hypertension, and dental disorders, 4.3 million. The Jamaican First policy is still in force, where indigent members who need to go overseas for health care as a result of the care not being available locally are sent to Jamaica to receive care. Once the service is available, this has provided tremendous savings to the government versus the previous situation where other more expensive overseas jurisdictions were being used as the first option. Mr. Speaker, I can say unequivocally, without a word of doubt, that I would like the first option to be right here at home in the Cayman Islands, whether that's in Grand Cayman or Cayman Brac or Little Cayman. And since we touched on that, Mr. Speaker, I think Cayman Brac is a destination that we need to really pay close attention to in terms of trying to offer some specialized service that persons need to travel to Cayman Brac, to ensure that we always include Cayman Brac into our consideration, and to ensure that their economy thrives also. Mr. Speaker, while there are a number of different steps being taken, I am sure you will agree with me that there are still many more opportunities to be explored. I do not think, Mr. Speaker, that there is a silver bullet or a magic wand that we can use to solve the problem of increasing healthcare costs. It is a global issue being driven by a number of factors, many of which we are also impacted by. People are living longer, and our population is aging. Chronic, non-communicable diseases continue to increase. People are more sedentary. Specialized diagnostic and treatment services are becoming more available and sometimes overutilized, and the cost of some pharmaceuticals continue to increase. Mr. Speaker, there are just a few of the factors at play, but I believe that by taking steps we have been taking and continue to identify and explore other opportunities, we will see improvements in our community's health and well-being, and hopefully a corresponding stabilization of both our health care costs and the government's expenditure on health care. Mr. Speaker, in ending, I want to say that my vision is that we save another generation. And the situation that we have now in terms of parents or persons who are unemployed, who have children, sometimes those children go uncared for because they don't have health insurance. I mean, it's mandatory for them to have health insurance, but they don't have the wherewithal. And sometimes because they own a piece of property or something, they're unable to be, they're not accepted by NAU for some unforeseen reason, and these children are just there suffering. So my determination and the government's vision is to ensure that all children receive access or have access to health care. And if that means that we need to ensure that it's free health care for children, then if we find a way to make this happen and to be and that we can financially secure a way to make this happen, Mr. Speaker. And as we've heard the many stories on the news and online about insurance companies and so forth, but we need to ensure that our next generations don't grow up with ailments like a third world country. And my desire is to ensure that with bipartisan support, that the opposition and the government can work together to ensure that one thing for sure is that we're going to have children being born and that we're all going to grow old. So we need to do all that we can to ensure that children receive free health care, in my opinion, and with the support of this unit of government and the Premier, and to ensure that our seniors are also not just thrown and after retired working for a company for 30 years and then just thrown to cynical and just benefiting from the cream of the crop 20-year-olds that really don't go to the doctor at all. So there are many issues that seniors wouldn't need on a policy like, like pregnancy benefits and so forth. Those are things that could come out. So there are ways that we're working on this SHIC 65 to ensure that the amount of benefits, because one of the concerns from the seniors were that they didn't have a lot of benefits with the plan and that the plan was a little expensive. So we need to find a way to ensure that there's more benefits in their plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I had caught the eye of
Thank you.
the member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just going to ask a little bit of leeway, only because the question I'm going to ask the minister is based on discussions I've had with him that the House would not have been privy to. What I can say to this Honorable House is that I've had meetings and discussions with the minister concerning healthcare. I can say this is something that he's not asleep at the wheel with, and this is something that I can say that he's actively working towards in terms of reducing healthcare costs, affordability, and also accessibility. So I can confirm that those discussions have been taking place. What the reason I'm asking for the broad leeway is that the question I want to ask, I don't want to give away some of the strategies that we are looking to employ for the simple fact that once you put it out there, the people who are getting rich and making money from it will start their little defense. So we need a little bit of, so they can't see coming. But the question I want to ask the minister is, we had met with some key stakeholders and we have kind of developed a plan, and I know it did require some assistance from the civil service in terms of providing certain information. And I would just like to know what progress have we made in terms of getting the information that we need to the stakeholders, so at least we can move to the next step and start looking at making healthcare a little bit more affordable and more accessible.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Bordentown West for that eloquent endorsement. And thank you again. Mr. Speaker, there have been many meetings with stakeholders, and information has been provided, there was a follow-up meeting, and additional information was requested, and that information should be turned over to the stakeholders at this time, for them to be able to come back to us with further information for us to be able to make a decision. So the answer is that yes, information has been provided to the stakeholders. Additional information has to be given to them. I was reliably informed by the ministry up until yesterday that that information will be forthcoming within the week. So we are making some progress. The future looks really bright, and there are other persons in other countries taking advantage of the capitated models that we're trying to look at. So the time for the unknown in terms of healthcare costs that the government has dealt with over the many years, just seeing the requests come every quarter, really needs to be to die about that.
Supplementaries, member from Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to thank the Minister for that answer. I do recognize that a question such as this is quite broad, as he said, and it can't be probably ventilated just through a question and answer session, but rather through a motion. But with that said, what I would like is just a commitment from the Minister, at least, just to keep us informed, and if need be, I'd be happy to attend, and so we can at least get moving. I fully endorse the bringing back the free health care for children. I think that'll do very far in terms of helping a lot of families in terms of insurance premiums per month, and that'll be one way of actually reducing health care costs to some families in Cayman.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I undertake to the member Bordentown West that we'll keep them informed. In fact, we are at a point now where we can, I've included the member in some meetings already, so he kind of knows the steer of what the government is thinking, and we hope to broaden that discussion and invite any member of the opposition so that they can also give their input, because we really want this to be a bipartisan effort. This is a win not for a party, but for the whole country. Thank you.
The acting leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Last supplementary.
Can the minister say whether or not we're doing any sort of analysis of the premiums being charged for health insurance, in terms of trying to establish whether or not people are getting benefit for their money, a good value for money, I should say?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Newlands for the question. And this has been a question, especially since the certain announcements on the news and on the internet in terms of policies, and I can say to the member that the only plan that we regulate is the SHIC plan. All the other plans are not regulated in terms of cost. we cap the cost of the SHIC plan. The cost of the other plans are not regulated by the Health Insurance Commission. That is something that we probably need to look at in the future. But currently, only the SHIC plan is what we regulate in terms of capping the cost of that.
Last supplementary.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of value for money then on the SHIC plan, are we satisfied that people are getting value for money? And why I ask is, I noticed in the statement, the benefits seem to add up to $600 a year in terms of what the SHIC plan offers, and I think that excludes emergency, ambulance, and so on. But the average, not average premium, but the premiums tend to be around about $1,800, $2,000 a year for someone who is subscribing to a SHIC plan. So we're paying more in premiums than we're getting in benefits based on what I see here. And I've verified this by calling and asking for pricing. So it's another area that we need to look into in terms of cost of living and trying to help people with insurance costs. Unless I'm missing some other component, I think that there's some concern there.
Mr. Speaker, based on the actuarial's review, the SHIC premium, on the SHIC premium, there's more offered than just the $600 per annum. There's the inpatient benefit. There are air ambulance benefit. There are repatriation benefits. But what I will do for the member of Newlands is to provide him with a list of all the other benefits that the SHIC plan provides, and based on that, they are satisfied right now with the cost of the SHIC plan.
Speaker,
Announced that was the last supplementary. Is this something that can't wait?
I was just going to thank the minister, Mr. Speaker. That was all. And to
Yeah,
say
you
that
can do that off there. Thank you. Next item.
Statements by the honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
I have received 3 statements for this morning. The Honorable, the Deputy Premier and Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to provide for members of this honorable House information regarding the Cayman Islands tourism industry and share our most recent tourism arrival statistics. The tourism sector continues to deliver a solid performance and is maintaining consistent growth. Total visitation, which includes both air and cruise arrivals for the period January to October 2018, was 1,928,534. Mr. Speaker, this represents an increase of 18.13%, or 296,018 additional visitors over the same period of 2017. Mr. Speaker, the combined visitation for the first 10 months of this year was the highest in our recorded history and has surpassed 2006, when the previous combined visitation record was established. It is worth highlighting, Mr. Speaker, that in 2006, 88% of our visitors arrived by cruise ship. This has decreased to 81% strategically in 2018. Mr. Speaker, focusing just on stayover arrivals for the moment, 372,812 visitors arrived by air during the first 10 months of 2018. This is 11.49% higher than the corresponding period of 2017. It equates to 38,411 more stayover arrivals. Once again, this is the highest number of stayover visitors ever recorded for the first 10 months of any year and has surpassed the previous record, which was established in 2017. Mr. Speaker, turning our attention now to the arrivals for the month of October 2018, the air arrivals registered a nominal 1% visitation from the U.S. Numbers were up by 4.05%. This equates 711 additional visitors and is the 19th consecutive month of growth. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. continues to dominate market share for our islands and is holding at 84%, up from 82% last year. Mr. Speaker, I note that last year for stayover visitors was bumped when the Eastern Caribbean had issues. It, as mentioned, was the highest October in recorded history. For us to be 1% above that is a tremendous result. As the members in this honorable House are aware, from August 2017, the Cayman Islands began receiving cruise calls from ships that had been diverted from ports in the Eastern Caribbean. This unexpected boost in passenger arrivals allowed us to end 2017 at 1% up over the previous year's arrivals. Mr. Speaker, had this not occurred, cruise arrivals for 2017 would have registered a significant decline. In 2018, Grand Cayman has continued to benefit from additional cruise calls, while ports in the Eastern Caribbean incrementally come back on stream. For the 10-month period between January and October 2018, 1,557,000 cruise passengers arrived in Grand Cayman, reflecting an increase of 19.84% compared to the same period in 2017. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Island Port Authority is forecasting that we will receive approximately 1.9 million cruise passengers by year end. For 2019, as more ships return to their original schedules, cruise arrivals are forecast to drop by 5% to 1.8 million passengers. Mr. Speaker, the importance for our islands is the increase in tourism has delivered a corresponding increase in revenue collection. For the first 9 months of this year, the economic contribution from both the stayover and cruise sectors have both increased. According to statistics compiled by the Cayman Island Department of Tourism, the economic contribution from stayover visitor spending has increased from $366 million in 2017 to $421.9 million in 2018. Between January and September of 2018, this represents, Mr. Speaker, an increase of $53.3 million, or 15.1% for those 9 months. Mr. Speaker, the individual spend for stayover visitor has gone up by 5.3%, from $183 per day to 193 CI dollars today. Mr. Speaker, make note that this is the way that you want your product to trend. It is one of the highest daily rates in the region, placing us in the top 2. And Mr. Speaker, it speaks volumes when not only do your arrivals increase, but what they spend increase, because that says that you're not lowering the cost to attract more visitors. You have a product that they want and they're prepared to pay more for it. The BRIA 2018 destination report for the Cayman Islands outlines the economic benefits of cruise tourism arising from 3 principal sources: onshore expenditures by passengers, onshore spending by crew, and cruise line expenditures for supplies such as food and beverages, port services, and fees. According to the 2018 BRIA report, cruise passenger spending has decreased from $115 per day in 2015 to $105 in 2018. Year 2017, 1.74 million passengers arrived at $105 a day, is a $182.7 million spend for our islands, as an example of the benefits. Mr. Speaker, outside the obvious economic benefits and impact on employment, tourism delivers a strong multiplier effect and is a key driver of development in other industries, such as real estate and construction. Several tourism-related developments are in various stages of development and are expected to boost capacity within our tourism accommodation sector by 20% in the next 2 years. As the minister responsible for tourism, on behalf of Unity Government, I'm very satisfied with the industry's growth, which has been on an upward trend. This growth has been achieved through a mix of government activity, public-private collaboration, and community participation, all working together to keep the Cayman Islands high on the global list of top-performing leisure destinations. Mr. Speaker, the increase in stayover arrivals in particular has been accomplished by the wide exposure of our islands receive in international print and digital media as a result of the work of the Ministry and the Department of Tourism. I would like to thank Chief Officer Bodden and the Director of Tourism, Ms. Rosa Harris, and their team, which they ably lead, for all of the effort and hard work that has been put in for these results. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism values partnerships, and I would like to publicly thank all our public and private sector contributors who work tirelessly to attract the attention of potential visitors and ensure they have a memorable experience on our islands when they arrive. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to end this on even a higher note than our double-digit growth and leading region tourism arrivals. I am very pleased to announce that Southwest Airlines will be adding seasonal service from Baltimore, Washington to Grand Cayman effective in June. Mr. Speaker, along with the new route of Denver, by our own Cayman Airways. We look forward to more growth in our industry and more gateways to serve us and more benefits for our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on standing orders 30, subsection 2, to ask a short, brief clarity question. Mr. Speaker, the minister spoke about the increase, and I'm glad for the update in respect to how great the tourism industry is doing, led by his capable ministry and leadership. Can the minister say, has there been any report to suggest a leveling out of this increase, or a report to suggest the reason for the increase? And just to give you a little bit of background, obviously we all accept that some of those increases are due to the damage within the region from past hurricane and their infrastructure of the Caribbean islands and the like. Has there been any studies or reports requested or given to you that give you an indication that these numbers will level out so that we can prepare ourselves not to have these expectations of monies and depend on them for too long if in fact it will decrease or level out? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question. We look at increasing arrivals and building our tourism as an opportunity for the country. And we take the challenge and the responsibility at the government level, and at the ministry level, and at the department level, that what our opportunity is to increase the economic benefit of this pillar to our country. And when we analyze how we grow the industry itself, we have to understand that there is a chain process to this. Number one, it's identifying the regions of the world that would enjoy traveling to the Cayman Islands. Number two, it's to make sure that once you identify them, if we identify them as centers of wealth that will enjoy, that we market to them in the right way. Remember, I tell you today that if you fish in a pond with no fish, it doesn't matter how much you spend on the fishing gear you got, you still catch no fish. So we spend our marketing money, as is evidenced by the growth, in the right places. Then we make sure that they have the opportunity to travel here in the easiest possible way. We take the retail theory that if you make it easy for somebody to purchase, they will buy. And we are successful in looking at the markets where we bring them from. But once we get them there, we have to marry the numbers between the airlift and what's available on the island, between the beds and the attractions and the benefits. And then we make sure that we deliver that in that chain way, that what we have promised and marketed to them, they receive when they get here. So we manage the expectation that what we have said we are going to sell them, they get. And we prove that our work is correct because we have one of the highest return rates of guests in the industry. Over 50% of guests that come the first time return. So we believe that the proof is that the strategy is working, and then the other part of it is all of the people, silos broken down, working together to make sure that everybody benefits from it. So we with 20% more growth from the hotel sector, we see continued growth and continued opportunity in opening new gateways, why Denver has been looked at and other gateways are being looked at, and why we attract other carriers to come here, because they're not going to fly here empty. They're coming because they know they have the rooms to fill and they'll have a good load factor. On the cruise, we're not as optimistic about the numbers continuing. We've made it very clear that the indications that we get from the cruise lines are that the ships on the western route will be changed out for larger size vessels, and as has been proven for the last 4 years, they will start to bypass Cayman. This is what has been discussed for many months now. I believe we have in writing the evidence from the people who control the ships and the routes. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to push my luck here, but I don't think I got a simple answer in respect to whether there was any reports indicating a decrease. If there isn't, and he hasn't requested any, a simple yes or no would answer the question.
Deputy Premier, you feel that you can take this further than what you've said? Call on the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to bring to the attention of this Honourable House the exceptional circumstances, appropriation changes which have resulted in the supplementary appropriations initiated by the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands for the period of January to September 2018. First, Mr. Speaker, we'll deal with the Department of Education and its increase to the base salary for teachers. The Minister, Mr. Speaker, reviewed the possibility to increase the base salary for all government school teachers to a minimum of $5,000 per month in 2 phases. Firstly, phase 1, increase the base salary to a minimum of $4,300 per month, which commenced on the 1st of September 2018, and 2, increase the base salary to a minimum of $5,000 per month as of September 1, 2020. Through this review, the Minister of Education sought to increase interest in teaching as a career for Caymanians, retain the quality teachers within the teaching profession in government schools, and attract quality teachers from other jurisdictions to meet the educational needs of our students. Teachers' salaries for government schools have remained largely stagnant for a number of years. Each year, there's a high turnover rate of teachers as they seek job opportunities elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, recruitment for quality teachers has become increasingly difficult without a competitive remuneration package. As a result of the increase, the following appropriations were increased. EGA 5, Primary Education Services, by $317,838. EGA 6, Secondary Education Services, by $289,287. EGA 7, Education for Students with Special Needs, by $47,689. As a part of this, Mr. Speaker, funding was transferred $527,000 cash, which was previously appropriated for the Young Nations Build It program and deposited at the Cayman Islands Development Bank, back to the Cayman Islands government. Cabinet funded the remaining $127,814. Mr. Speaker, I'm also glad to indicate that the Minister was also able to successfully implement phase 1 of the review and salary enhancement with the support of the Cabinet. A total of $654,814 were utilized for phase 1. The Department of Education, additional staff to support students with special educational needs here in Grand Cayman as well as in Cayman Brac. The number of students, Mr. Speaker, diagnosed as having special educational need fluctuates each year. There are a number of students who enroll in government schools from private schools or off-island who have already been diagnosed as having a special educational need. Across the system, Mr. Speaker, there has been an increase in SEND students, with students coming in from private schools as a result of the private schools' inability to produce for the students' individual needs, and as a result of the present economic situation where some parents can no longer pay private school fees. There was a significant need, therefore, to put in support for the key stage, that is years 2 and years 4 to 6 age-wise, and our high schools as well, Mr. Speaker. Across the system, there's been an increase in some of the more severe special educational needs diagnosis. These students at times require one-to-one support, as this enables them to access the mainstream education. In our high schools, this is particularly important as students with special education needs learn to navigate the large campuses. The rationale for an occupational therapist on Cayman Brac. Mr. Speaker, there are currently 24 students who require the services of an occupational therapist, or OT, on Cayman Brac. Ideally, occupational therapists should be provided at least once or twice per week. At present, an OT from Grand Cayman travels to Cayman Brac every other week, with an assistant traveling over to check on therapy in other weeks. The size of the caseload makes it impossible, Mr. Speaker, to see students even weekly to ensure that they are able to meet their full potential. There is therefore a need for a significant increase in occupational therapy services in Cayman Brac. The OT would work with a wide variety of issues, from students who have physical and motor difficulties to those with fine motor issues, and students needing sensory intervention to help them be successful at school. Mr. Speaker, the OT could also offer support to the children at the Cayman Brac Daycare Center. Currently, there are 5 occupational therapists on the island of Grand Cayman. The rationale for speech and language therapists on Cayman Brac. There are also 24 students who require speech and language therapy in Cayman Brac, and an additional 3 children waiting for assessment. The Health Services Authority, HSA, provided for a time speech and language therapist, SALT, to the children and adults, and this supplemented the services provided by the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, the HSA services were dependent on insurance or the ability for parents or guardians to pay for these services. The HSA no longer provides speech and language services. Some time ago, Cayman Brac had the services of a full-time speech and language therapist from the Department of Education Services. The full-time service was replaced, Mr. Speaker, by a weekly visit by a speech and therapist from Grand Cayman. Over the years, this has been an increase in the number of students requiring such services of the speech and languages professional. Mr. Speaker, the weekly visits from the therapist and the bi-weekly visits from an assistant are simply not sufficient to assist the students on Cayman Brac who have speech and language issues that range in severity. The SALT is only able to schedule appointments for 8 students per day from the primary schools, high schools, and the Cayman Brac Daycare Center. Currently, there are 9 speech and language therapists on Grand Cayman. As a result of this, Mr. Speaker, our coalition government approved for 10 additional posts to support students with special education needs in the schools on Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac. These specific training staff were as follows: 8 assistant teachers for Grand Cayman, 1 speech and language therapist for Cayman Brac, and 1 occupational therapist for Cayman Brac. The ministry was able to fund $146,500 for these posts through savings on EI-12 capital and increased EGA 7 education for students with special needs. Mr. Speaker, moving on now to CRIFTA and its anticipated operational costs, which I have announced in another forum will take place here next Easter. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands have been selected as the host country for Carifta Games 2019. The Carifta Games are an annual youth athletics championship which was started in 1972 by the Caribbean Free Trade Association, Carifta, which later transitioned into the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. The Cayman Islands participated in these games as an associate member of CARICOM, which I know that you're very much familiar with, having been the architect of that.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, is there a point of order?
Quorum.
Honorable members, will someone seek to make the House quorum?
On a statement, you don't have a question to vote. So this is on statements, there's no question to vote. That's what I'm telling you. A quorum is only relevant when you have a statement or a question to put. And you don't put questions in statements. So I will object. Nice and rest.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, the Games attract a number of international media and college scouts from the United States in search of our local athletic talent. The Games are owned by the regional governing body for athletics called NACA, and they are executed under its authority by a local organization committee established with the support of the Cayman Islands Athletic Association, CIAA. Mr. Speaker, the local organizing committee, NACA, advised that the sum of $880,342 CI dollars would be required to cover the operational expenses to host this important regional sports event. Due to the significant benefits, including exposure of our athletes and islands through sports tourism, the ministry saw that this was an important committed cost to support, and TP 72 other youth sports programs assistance were increased by this amount. The ministry was able to internally source these funds from our savings in EI 12 capital funds appropriation, land purchases, and increased appropriation to EA 4. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, Scotia Bank property. Mr. Speaker, the government had the opportunity to purchase the former Scotia Bank building in Georgetown and its satellite car parks to support a larger, well-needed project to ultimately provide substantially enhanced court facilities. After detailed outline business case and proposed options were issued to Cabinet by the Judicial Department, it was deemed as a necessary purchase in order to meet the court's growing accommodation needs. Mr. Speaker, the terms of the sale are detailed as follows. A, Block OPY, parcels 94, 66, and 80, sold in as-is condition. B, the price of US $6.29 million, or CI $7,272,063. C, the completion was done by Friday the 24th of August this year. D, no deposit was required upon the signing of the purchase agreement. E, a temporary leaseback occupation on ground floor and the second floor, and 50 car spaces by the vendor until the 1st of this month, plus a 3-month option to extend at a monthly rent to the government, the value to $30 US per square foot, plus a service charge for the second floor of US $7.50 per square foot. For the ground floor, plus a service charge for the ground floor as well. The service charge, Mr. Speaker, was $12 US for a square foot for the ground floor and the second floor to be documented by way of a lease. F, the purchaser will inherit an existing license granted to Digicel to locate an antenna on top of the roof. G, some existing furniture may be available to purchase. And H, each party is to bear its own legal cost. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, Scranton Community Park. Mr. Speaker, Georgetown Central Property, Block 14 CJ Parcel 22, was recently purchased, as the Premier indicated a few days ago, and it was put on the open market for sale. The land, Mr. Speaker, is flat and fenced and includes a tarmac basketball court. It has historically been used by local residents as a community park and children play area for many, many years. The land was becoming overgrown, Mr. Speaker, and also partly being used to store some old temporary shed-like timber structures and decor, perhaps originating from carnival floats in times past. The owner decided, Mr. Speaker, to offer the parcel for sale on an open market, as the government was keen to purchase it in order to ensure that local residents could continue to use the said parcel as a community park. Being close to the center of Georgetown, Mr. Speaker, there was no other land in this vicinity available for this type of public use activity. The property was purchased for consideration of $272,500 from Marlene Angela Gregory for the purpose of continued use as a public community park after EA4 purchase of land appropriation was increased. The stamp duty was waived due to the purchase agreement and the transfer of land pursuant to the authority given by the Minister of Finance under Section 26 of the Stamp Duty Law 2013 revision. And Mr. Speaker, there was also an increase to the appropriation for the equity injection EI-12. Under the current ownership agreement between the University College of the Cayman Islands, UCCI, the Cayman Islands government, CIG, the UCCI was allocated $861,470 for the nursing program building for 2018 fiscal year. The UCCI became aware that it would be unable to proceed with the proposed capital works due to the building code requirements from planning, and therefore requested for a reallocation of its capital expenditure. UCCI wished to utilize only $555,000, and this would leave an unrequired budget surplus of $306,470. The Ministry has received a number of additional requests for capital and is currently reviewing these, and as a result, it is intended that the savings realized by UCCI will be utilized for these purposes. The Minister is therefore seeking to transfer the unrequired balance from EI 46 UCCI special capital of $306,470 to the Ministry's capital appropriation EI 12 in order to meet these additional ministry capital requests. Mr. Speaker, we also saw an increase in appropriation for the Early Childhood Assistance Program, ECAP, funded by TP 72. The Minister of Education provides funding to assist with access to early educational opportunities for eligible Caymanian children between the ages of 3 years and reception age. As of September 1st this year, we had a rolling program. We also met the set criteria, Mr. Speaker. These young children are able to access early childhood care and education opportunities to participate in quality learning experiences that guide and support these children in becoming well-rounded citizens. The number of applications, Mr. Speaker, for the program has exceeded the funding allocation. In order to honor these payments for the eligible children, additional funds of 75,000 CI was requested to increase the appropriation TP 72 preschool education assistance. Savings in EI 12 capital was transferred to satisfy this additional need. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you for allowing me to explain these exceptional circumstances which have resulted in the supplementary appropriations initiated by the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands from the period of January 2018 to September 2018. And I would ask for you to permit me also to thank the valuable assistance I received from the staff in the ministry and the various relevant departments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House will suspend until 2:30.